Every leader has bad days. Most pretend they don't. This is the show where leaders stop pretending and start learning. Welcome to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast, where leaders pull back the curtain on decisions they cringe about, runes they misread, and the failures that shaped everything after. Real leaders, real mistakes, real lessons. Because you can't become a great leader without a few bad days. Welcome back, everybody, to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast, the show where we take life's lessons, those things that happen to us, or maybe that we create on those days that we are not at our best, or maybe our decisions weren't their best, and we learn lessons and we grow, and we become more and more the leader that we are called and designed to be because we're willing to grow and learn. So thank you for being with us today. Looking forward to the conversation. I am thrilled to have with us today Dr. Ken Jones. Dr. Jones has been somebody who I've watched lead, I've been led by, and just recently even wrote a book with on leadership. And so I appreciate him being with us today. Dr. Jones is currently the president of Oklahoma Christian University, has been the CEO of Lubbock Christian University, my alma mater, for 19 years, has worked in engineering, has worked in business, and worked in executive coaching and leadership development for many years, and just thrilled to have him with us today. Dr. Jones, welcome to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast.
Well, thank you for letting me be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So I know a lot about your work because I've experienced it, but I also know I don't know near as much as I think I may know. And there's probably many moments that you look back on and say, that didn't go as well as I had hoped. What can we learn from it? And so I'm looking forward to hearing some things today. You and I have talked about leadership for years, and especially when you think about a book being written and now out into the world and having become a bestseller, it's been a lot of fun. But we've also, we probably haven't spent enough time learning. I haven't probably spent enough time asking questions about those days that didn't go as planned. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation and learning from your wisdom today. So when we think about leadership, it's a subject you've taught on, spoken on, written on for years, but you've also lived it. And I think today we're going to probably spend some more time in your lived experience as a leader. When you think about your career as a leader, are there any decisions that you look back on and you go, oh, man, I just wish I could have that one over. I wish I had a do-over on that. Maybe something you still regret, or, and you've moved on and grown from it, but it still bothers you. And what was the lesson learned?
Yeah, there are probably hundreds of decisions that I have forgotten that I would like to go back and redo, but they weren't the big ones. But I have often told people groups that I think there are three major decisions that I have made in my career as a leader that were all giant mistakes. Three. I could name them if I wanted to name them for you. And I can tell you how they happened. As a leader, your best asset are the people around you. The best asset you have is the people around you. They're talented, they're smart, they give good advice. And as a leader, you learn to trust them. And if you don't trust them, you don't give them much responsibility. But if you learn to trust them, so you have this relationship with them. I've had 3 times in my past when I deep down inside thought, this is not right. This is not the right thing to do. And yet my team around me was saying, no, this is what you've got to do. This is what you must do. And 3 different times in my life, I have said, okay, they're smart people. They know what they're doing. My feeling inside must be wrong. And so I've gone with what they've said. And 3 different times, it has been a monumental failure. It has been a giant mistake. And I've spent a long time having to clean up that mistake. And obviously, it stings me inside because I still remember them. I can still articulate every one of those 3 times in my life. So what I've learned from that is, if you have this strong feeling inside, even though you've got good people around you, you better be telling them, here's my feeling inside, and I don't want to go against this feeling inside, because when you do, it's often, it may be, for my case, always a mistake. So
That's great. That's great. Well, I appreciate that. Uh, so early in your career, I don't know much about your early career. I know you have a PhD in engineering. You were a faculty member, doing research and teaching and all the things at Oklahoma State. I know where you were, but I don't know much about those experiences early in your career, before you got into ministry and all the things that came after. When you think about some of those early days, was there ever a boss that, or somebody who had a position of leadership in authority, maybe even over you, that you looked at and you just said, man, if I'm ever in a spot to lead people, I will not do it like that? Are there any stories about that sort of thing? Something you'd never repeat? You hoped you would never
well,
repeat.
I've had both experiences. I had in my earliest days, I had a leader that was really, really good. And I remember as a new department chair that came in from Purdue University, and he was just a brilliant engineer. And I can tell you the positive things I learned. The two positive things I learned were one day I was working nights, I was working days, I was working all the time, and one day I was driving down the road, and it was Friday afternoon. I was leaving my office. I was leaving early, leaving at noon actually, and he saw me, and I thought, oh my lands, he's probably going to wonder what in the world I'm doing. So Monday morning, I go in his office and I say, Tom, I need to tell you the reason why I was leaving and what I've been doing. And he said, you know what? You got to learn something about how I lead. He said, I don't care when you work. He said, what I care about is whether or not you get the job done. And I'll never forget, he leaned over on the right side of his desk and he pulled out an 8-page evaluation form for Oklahoma State University. And he said, at the end of the year, here is what I grade you on. I'll either mark at the bottom of this form special merit or satisfactory or unsatisfactory, and I'll raise your pay based on that. So he taught me, I don't care when you work, I just want you to get the job done. So I've had that. He also taught me another wonderful lesson about leadership, but I've also watched other leaders and experienced other leaders who are, I don't know if it's being ego out of control, or I don't know if it's just being insecure, but they get so easily threatened. And so when someone comes up with an idea that's different from theirs, they get threatened. And when they get threatened, they do bizarre things, and they get loud, they get critical, they tend to micromanage. And I saw that early in my career and thought, I don't want any part of that. In fact, I was offered a job one time, and it was if I'd have taken that job, my whole career choice path would have changed. And the job was so prominent. The person said, you know, you write your own job description. This was with a big utility group. And he said, you write your own job description. Well, I never did that. And about 30 days later, he called me and said, where is that job description? I need you to get down here now and go to work. And I said, no, I'm not coming. And I didn't come because of the giant of what I thought was ego on his part and demanding on his part. And when I saw him working with people that was just so abusive at times, I thought, no, I don't. I was young and naive. I didn't know any better, but I thought I better stay out of that mess. So I've seen both those.
Yeah.
Really good leaders, really leaders not so good.
Yeah. I know we've discussed it. We've talked about it. I've heard you speak on it, and then we wrote about it. The whole idea of an ego out of control always leads to destruction. You just described being able to catch that and sense that early in career. That's such a blessing. Think about how different things could have been. Yeah, you might have made more money in the moment, but man, think about that. Wow.
Yeah, everybody always says, if you had it all to do over again, would you take a different pathway? And I say, no, I don't know. I think I'd be afraid to. Because things have worked out in a wonderful way. I just kind of be afraid to go a different direction. Yes, I might have made more money, but I'm telling you what you just mentioned about leadership is when leaders get off center, maybe that's a good word in the coaching world, get off center in their ego, and they get threatened. It's a dangerous space to be in. And I've seen that, and I've experienced some of that. And I think, wow, you're going to get yourself in trouble if you stay around this very long. And the good news is they don't last that long. They usually go away.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. In the last couple of days, we've been recording different episodes for this podcast, and I've visited. You're the fourth person I visited with in the last 24 hours, and every one of them different questions, different contexts, different experiences. Retired lieutenant colonel, Green Beret, New York Times best-selling author times a million, you know. And just a few minutes ago, even national championship basketball player turned one of the most high-profile college basketball coaches of the last 25 years, and every single one of them talked about ego, and that it is the leading cause of destruction. And I think you and I've zeroed in on there's biblical example of that. I mean, this has been the age-old journey. It is the challenge. And when we think about the bad days that people have, think about the bad days I've had. Goodness, it's so much of it is tied to I got off center, and I think I've seen it around me too. And so it's
and we all do it. I mean, I
Yeah.
try to be on my guard about this ego thing all the time, because when you're in a leadership position, people pat you on the back and they say, "Man, it was a great speech, and you're doing such a wonderful job." And if you ever begin to believe that stuff, if you begin to believe your own press, you know, you get yourself in trouble pretty easily. So I usually pretty careful about that and say, well, for every good one, I've had some really bad ones too, you know. So
Sure, sure. So when I think about my perspective again of your career, academics, ministry, higher education, administration, coaching and speaking and training, consulting, different things that you've done from my perspective. You've been in a lot of different rooms. You've been in a lot of different rooms with leaders, boardrooms, one-on-one. I've seen you read the room, at least as I've observed, read the room pretty well, but I'm sure there's some moments out there where maybe you misread the room and you maybe paid for it a little bit later, or your organization did, or you saw some conflict or challenge come from a moment where you misread the room. Have you ever either yourself or watched a leader completely misread the room and change the trajectory of the opportunity, or create a bad path, if you will, just because the room was misread in the moment?
yeah, I think that it happens to everybody, of course, but I've been in the world of public speaking a lot, and you can come in with a speech, for example, and you think you have a reason for being there. You're told that the reason is there, and you get there and find out that there's nobody there that understands that reason, and they don't even know what you're there to talk about, and you feel like you're there and by yourself, and they don't want to be there. And so I've been in those situations over and over again. And I'm telling you, what I've learned to do now is just stop and say, wait a minute, I think we got our wires crossed here. Let me hear what you want to talk about. And so I think you can misread the room really easily. I think you can misread people really easily. But man, what I've kind of come to now is that leaders need to make an effort to grow in their own emotional intelligence, because if you're not able to size up a group pretty quickly, if you're not able to get certain cues of what certain people are saying in the room, and you're able to pivot on that cue, if you're not able to do that, you are going to go down a pathway where you get yourself in deep trouble. So I may come into a room with an agenda, and it may be a new group. I may think I'm there for another reason, and I hear someone say one phrase, and I hear another person say something else. I think, oh, wait a minute. I need to be careful what I say here or which direction I go, because I may say something that would go completely different from what they want to be a part of. I remember doing that with a police group one time. It was a group of police officers who had come together, and they wanted to talk about leadership. And my mistake was I didn't know their world very well. I knew some leadership concepts, but I didn't know their world very well. And so the first thing I know, I'm just talking. I'm into a story, and I can see across their faces that this is a story that they do not like, that this is a situation they think I handled poorly, and they think that if I knew what I was talking about, I wouldn't even be talking to them about it. So it was a totally embarrassing moment. I still recall that. I still bring it up once in a while, not openly and not, but it still lodges in my mind. And what I was not emotionally intelligent enough to realize the group I was with, the direction they were going, and what I was saying. And you've got to be able to pivot. You've got to be able to be aware. Your senses have to be. And when you're too full of yourself and you're too full of what your message is, and you think your message is right, it's dangerous territory. Got to be careful with that.
So while you were saying that, it hit me that I've seen you in action. It's been a long time, though. We worked together at the beginning of my career, and then it was at least almost 13 years ago that I left that institution and moved to Nashville and started a new path. But I remember many opportunities where I was able to be in the room. I was too young to be in the room. John Deloney and I talk about this all the time. You and others encouraged us to be in the room before we were ready. But we learned a lot of lessons. One of those lessons it just struck me that I think I probably learned from you and others. I think about others in our shared history that probably helped me learn this as well. But when you go into those rooms and you know you're about to sit down for another meeting, another conversation, it could be a totally different topic than the last one. But, in higher ed, especially, because I lived in that space, it's meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And the topic is, it could be marketing and enrollment. It could be fundraising. It could be the budget. It could be buildings and grounds. It could be a lot of different things. But you, amongst others, but I think especially you early on, I learned this. You didn't walk in and start talking. You walked in and started listening. And I don't say that just to pat you on the back, but I think it's an example of what you're talking about, and it's a lesson we can all learn. This isn't a question I was planning to ask, but are there moments where you, maybe not a regret, but you remember you walked in and you started talking, and you wished you'd walked in and started listening?
Yeah.
I think I've seen you do that really well, but I wonder if there were some moments where maybe just because of the nature of the moment, it was just...
Well, the painful part of this conversation is we all learn from experience.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I tell you what happens most of the time in some of these meetings, and where leaders have to be really careful, is many of your meetings are emotionally charged. So you walk into a room, and the people are already worked up. They already have their emotions out there a long ways. And I've had a few experiences where I walk into what you call town hall meetings. And so that's people gathered together from a wide constituency, and they've got a particular issue that they want to talk about. And so you walk in and you immediately feel the emotionally charged room, and you people say things that they shouldn't say, and they say things in aggravated ways. And sometimes I find that even on little meetings, it's emotionally charged. And so what I have coined is one of my tiny principles I use over and over again is never flinch. So if you walk in and you listen for a moment, and someone, in this day and time especially, there are very few filters. People have learned they don't have to have very many filters, and they can get by with very little filter. And so they just say what they're thinking, and they say it sometimes crudely and rudely. But I've learned that the best thing I can do is never, ever flinch. I keep my calm. I don't change my facial expression. I don't say, "What did you just say?" What I end up doing is over and over again, just doing questions. So I listen, I try to pick up where the emotion is, and I ask a what or how question. I very seldom ever ask a why question. Why questions are questions that put you on the defensive. Well, why do you say that? Why did you do that? I ask, well, what do you think we ought to do about this? Or how could we do this differently so that it might be more appealing to you? Or what can I do to make you more interested? Because What I find is I walk into rooms all the time that are emotionally charged. And the best thing I can do is pick up on the emotion and diffuse it with questions. And they're not hard questions, they're gentle questions. And actually, that's a good parenting skill too. You ought to learn that at home,
Saw me
so
grab my
with your
pen
children.
and
That's
write
right.
some of that down. What and how
Right.
questions, not why questions. Um, I've heard you briefly talk about that you call it mini principle of never flinching. In fact, that one is something that's resonated with me a lot in the last 6 or 8 months since I heard you say that the first time. And you tie it, as you often do, you tie it to a biblical story or example. And I think I've heard you tie that to the story of Moses, that moment where they're standing at the Red Sea. They've left Egypt. They got the Red Sea in front of them. They've got Pharaoh's army chasing them down. There's this moment where everybody is really excited, challenged, anxious. There's lots of chaos. And what does Moses do? He doesn't flinch. And I love that.
Yeah, well, that ties into the great big concept of leadership presence. It's how you show up. What do people see? So when I walk into a room, if I've got to realize they're emotionally charged. You talk about Moses. Think about the emotion going on in that setting. It wasn't a room, but that setting when people are saying, "Look, we're trapped. There's no way out of this, and you got us here. It's your fault." And Pharaoh's coming. He's going to kill us all. And Moses stands up, and what I love about that story is Moses says, "Be calm, stand still. This is going to work out. See what God's going to do." But if you're reading that story in the book of Exodus, the Old Testament book of Exodus, the very next verse, it says, God says to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to go forward." So I always visualize this picture of Moses getting away from the room, away from the people, and getting over behind a rock and saying, "God, what in the world are we going to do?" It's not that I'm calm on the inside. It's just that if I don't stay calm on the outside in emotionally charged settings, I'll make a big mess of it. For if I match my emotion to their emotion, we got a battle going on.
Yeah.
And no leader wants a battle.
Yeah. I love that. It's interesting. A couple weeks ago, I was walking through the airport and had a delay, and I went into there used to be bookstores in the airport. Now they just got book racks, and I was just
Right.
seeing what was out there. Maybe looking to see if a certain book was in the shelf. It wasn't, but it should be. But I did see one, and it made me laugh, and I meant to send you a picture of it, and I forgot. Now I'm just remembering because I thought the principle never flinch might be a great topic for the next book.
Mm-hmm.
For me, for us, whatever. And I thought, man, that's going to be a good one. And then I looked at the bookshelf, and Stephen King has a book, a horror story, Never Flinch. And so I don't think it's the same principle. I don't think it's the same thing, but we might have to come up with a different title. But the
Well,
principle
maybe the title is "Leaders Never Flinch" because
maybe
you
maybe
got to be
so.
really careful about that.
Maybe so. But that principle, Never Flinch, has been on my mind for a while since you introduced it to me. So I think you may have already answered part of this question, but there may be more to it. When you work with leaders in your day to day, in your experience, what's a red flag? I think you may have mentioned ego and just how it presents itself as being maybe a red flag for sure. But what's another red flag that you spot almost instantly when you walk into a room, when you're in a setting where you're introduced to new people, when you're going in to maybe work with a team, whatever it may be? What's a red flag for you in terms of leadership beyond maybe the ego and the humility
Well,
piece?
I would reaffirm that ego is my number one. I watch that because I know that ego, if it's out of control, it doesn't tell the truth. It always tries to cut corners. It just gets you in trouble. But I think the second thing I try to watch is what I would call authenticity. It's just if they're genuine. If I think they're not trying to do too much self promotion, too much self protection, just are they transparent and authentic? I think those are because if someone's not, then I don't know that I can trust what they will be later. And I'm trying to figure out on an interview or in a first meeting or first few meetings, who am I really dealing with in this particular setting? And I find the people that are calm, authentic, transparent, willing to say, I'm not perfect, I've made some mistakes. Here's what I'm good at. Here's what I'm not good at. That captures my attention pretty quickly, and I watch for that.
That's great.
I watch if it's a sales job, if it's a self promotion. I had a guy in last week. I had a person in last week. I had a meeting with my senior leadership team because I said, I want you to tell me what our blind spots are in a certain endeavor I'm trying to do. Well, this person was doing a job, I think, maybe of selling themselves and so forth. But other people around me, and I did as well, picked up on a lot of name dropping and a lot of self promotion and so forth, and thinking, okay, is that real or is that not real? I want to try to believe, give benefit of the doubt that it's not real, but it didn't come across well. And so people picked up on that. So again, it goes back to authenticity, goes back to sincerity, goes back to genuineness, goes back to humility. You can kind of sense that in people.
Yeah. So sometimes there's bad days and sometimes there's bad seasons, or hard seasons. Let's just say that, harder seasons than others. I'm wondering if maybe there's been a season or two along your journey as a leader that you just felt like, just every day was just a burden. Sometimes people call leadership the glorious burden, right? And sometimes that's more real than others. When you think about some of those seasons, what were some of the lessons you learned that have proven to be really valuable to you on the other side?
Yeah. Matt, you mentioned that I had been president of a little university in Lubbock, Texas called Lubbock Christian University for 19 years. First of all, I think that's too long. I think to be in one place for 19 years as a leader is you're pushing it a little bit. And if you read the literature, the number one mistake that a CEO makes is staying too long. So what happened and what I saw happening was at year 16, I knew that things were changing inside of me, that the anxiety was building. And I will tell you in leadership, the stress is a cumulative thing. And so you might get past some stressful times that happened a year ago and 5 years ago and 10 years ago. And now you think you're doing pretty well. And all of a sudden a hard season hits. And all of a sudden, all those other things come racing back into your life. And all those old memories come racing back. And the stress is even greater. And so what I found was that I was violating my principle of never flinching. In the last little bit of time, the anxiety was building, and I was just becoming a different person. And I had many people tell me that. They said, "You're quiet, you're too serious, you're not playful, you're something is changing," and more than one said, we think it's your job, and we think your job is killing you. And so when I go back and look at that, I think that the time when I allowed stress to continue, and I went to our board of trustees and I said in year 16, you've got to get me out. I said, I'm too young probably to go do something else. I don't know what I want to do. But I said, I'm going to mess up in the last bit of time what I built over all these years if you don't get me out. And then I read a book called Failure of Nerve by a guy named Friedman. It's a complicated book. I read that book twice, took a lot of notes on it, but it really, really helped me. And it talked about some of the things I'm talking about. When your reaction to the reaction of others begins to intensify, you know you're in trouble. When you become less playful, you know you're in trouble. When you become serious all the time, you begin to sense that you're in trouble. I was all three of those. And so Friedman was saying in his book, that's chronic anxiety, and I think I had it. And so I think I could have easily destroyed the decent work I'd done for years in the last little bit of time had I not gotten out. And even then, I think I stayed a year too long. So
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting in that season. I remember I was there. I was around. I wasn't in the room always for sure, but I remember observing, and I was also studying leadership in that season. And you and I would share book ideas back and forth. And Failure Nerve was one you said you got to read this, but it's tough. And I remember buying it and reading through it. It is tough. And in that season of my life, young, emerging, had some direct reports and some goals to hit and a lot of energy for the future. It was a really centering book in a lot of ways, very sobering book too.
yes.
Just that the whole idea around all of that, and there were several books you recommended to me back then that helped shape a lot of things. The other one that I talk about all the time, and people who are listening to this who've heard me speak in the last 10 years probably have heard some reference to the book Necessary Endings.
Yeah, and that plays right into the hand that I was talking about, because
Yeah.
when you've been somewhere 19 years, it's kind of like you're the founder. It's kind of like you own it. You're just so entwined with it, and yet I picked up Henry Cloud's book of Necessary Endings, and the whole premise of the book is sometimes something has to end before something can get better. Well, I realized that first and foremost in my own life. Something may have to end here before it can get better. And I can't keep going. I can't keep putting my wife through what I was putting my wife through. And I mean, I don't know how much time you have in this podcast, Matt, but I will tell you that in that season, I had gotten an email from Henry Cloud's partner, John Townsend. I don't know how I got the email, but he invited me to go to a leadership coaching program that he was starting in Dallas, where one day a month he would come in from San Diego and we would talk to us all. And I did a phone interview with him. I think the phone interview was only to find out if I had enough money to pay for it, because it was kind of expensive. But I ended up in this group with 6 other guys. And about 3 months in, Townsend called me and he said, so on a Saturday morning, and it made me really nervous. I mean, why is John Townsend calling me on a Saturday morning? And he called me and he said, hey, Jones, I got you figured out. Well, that made me more nervous. And thankfully, I was in the car by myself. Suze was visiting our granddaughter on the side of a soccer field. And I remember saying to John, I said, John, what do you got figured out? He said, you're about the most classic CEO I've ever met. Well, Matt, I'm a minnow in his pond. I mean, he's good dealing with these big guys.
Yeah.
And big ladies. I'm a little minnow. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, Jones, you're killing yourself. He said, you're the kind of guy that runs and runs and runs, and you make all these decisions, and you don't want anybody to get close to you. And you think you have to be Superman, and you can't admit any kind of failure. And he said, you're killing yourself on the inside. By this time in the conversation, I was really worn out with it. I mean, I knew he was right. And I said, John, you're exactly right. I said, I'm dying on the inside. I think I have to be Superman all the time in every audience and every group, every situation. And he interrupted. He said, I don't know your wife, but I'm going to make a prediction to you. He said, my guess is you're killing your wife. He said, because you probably come home and she's the only person you'll really talk to and the only person upon whom you'll really unload all these things. And you're probably talking about how difficult the faculty are and how difficult the money is and how this people over here are so critical. And I said, man, John, she is so fragile. I think she would rather me not even come home than come home the way I'm coming home sometimes. And he said, Jones, I'm going to fix you. And I said, well, how in the world are you going to fix me? Well, he gave me his remedy to fix me, and actually it helped a lot. But I'm telling you, what he sensed was this feeling that you can never be vulnerable, this feeling that you cannot admit to people, hey, I don't know how to do it. I made a mistake. And it builds up inside and builds up inside. And I'm going to tell you, Superman or Superwoman is not real.
Yeah.
Clark Kent was not real. I mean, I'm just telling you. So
Yeah.
I've learned now how to be more vulnerable. So I don't mind telling you, Matt, or I don't mind telling your audience. I don't mind telling a lot of people, say, hey, I don't have all the answers. And so often I don't know what to do. So often I literally don't know what to do. So I have to find all these people to say, what do you think about this? What should we be doing? And spend a lot of time actually in prayer and contemplation and just thinking, what comes next? Because I'm not that smart.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate your vulnerability even in sharing that. And I'm sitting here thinking I was observing while you were navigating that and observing from a place of interest because you were my boss's boss, but also because I had heard you talk on things like this and lead and present on these kinds of things. The proactive approach to leadership, the positive side of leadership, but you were living in the mess that is leadership and the complexity. I tell people all the time, when I'm speaking to a group or working with a client, leadership is one of the most lonely places you can be. It's one of the most complicated roles you will ever have, positional leadership especially. And it's going to be so messy. And you have to know that. You can't just be surprised by that. And you have to, and I think leaders have to share those stories.
It's so messy, Matt. If everything in this world were black and white, there wouldn't be anything to leadership. If everything was just black and white, crystal clear, it'd be easy. But my definition of wisdom is this. Wisdom is that space between black and white. And I've been forced to live most of my life in that space between the two. If it were black or white, decisions come easily. But in that space in between, you're always searching for what is the right pathway. Or in the life of a person's kind of got a problem and you're trying to figure out what is the right step to help this person get out of this problem, or what's my step as a leader in dealing with that? Because what's the truth here? And so in that gray area, in that space in between black and white, it gets so very, very messy. And you have to beg for wisdom. You have to search for wisdom. You have to be really careful or you mess things up even more.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole book of Proverbs, right? Get wisdom. Get wisdom. It's so critically important. So, what advice, if you could, a lot of people who listen to this show, not everybody, but a lot of people who at least have commented and shared with me that they're enjoying the Bad Days Leadership podcast, are people who are early career or mid-career, or maybe they're not the CEO of an organization, but they're the mid-level manager that has a team they're trying to navigate. They have maybe hopes and dreams and vision of themselves aspiring maybe to other leadership levels in terms of their organization, but knowing that some of our audience is in that space, what's some advice that you wish someone had told you as an early leader in those first days when you were a department chair or the minister at a mid-sized church in Oklahoma, or those before the CEO days? What do you wish someone had told you early on?
Well, I don't know if I wish somebody would have told me, or if anybody would have been able to tell me. But I will tell every aspiring leader, every emerging leader, everyone who is just getting started, you pay a lot of attention to who you are, and you never stop growing with who you are. And I wish someone would have articulated that better for me, because what happens in this world of ours is we end up paying a lot of attention to what we do, and we get consumed with this job or that job or just what we do. In fact, I'll venture to guess that most of the time when you meet people, one of the first things that is asked in those meetings is, well, what do you do? And so that's where we spend so much of our life, what we do. And then as life progresses, you spend so much of your time with what you have, what you do and what you have, when very little of our time is spent on who we are. And it ends up that who we are is more important than what we do and what we have, because who we are is going to determine what what our future really is going to be. So if someone in your organization is looking at all the potential leaders out there, all the ones who are emerging in leadership, I promise you, it's not going to be the skill that you exhibit or the great brain power that you might have in a certain subject area. They're going to be paying a lot of attention to who you are, not just what you do, what you're able to do, but who you are. So what I wish as an early age that someone would have actually told me that even earlier than when I started to college, very first time. I wish someone had said, who you are is more important. I wish my granddad or somebody would have said, son, let me tell you what is important here. And then never stop improving who you are. The issue is not to be the best. No one can be the best at everything. The issue is to be better. The word is not best. The word is better. How do I become a better version of myself tomorrow than I am today? In every area of life. So I wish someone would have told me it's who I am that will make the biggest difference in my entire career. They're going to be looking at your character. They're going to be looking at how you react. They're going to be looking at how you've handled your ego. They're going to look at all these things. And the only thing that can master those is growth in who you are. So I would love to tell every emerging leader, every beginner, every college student that walks this campus or any campus, you pay a lot of attention to who you are. Because if you grow in who you are, I just think God has a lot of plans for you. And as you become a better version of yourself, He's able to do more with your life and more opportunities come.
So
people all the time ask me, how do you create opportunities? I don't know. I think opportunities come to those who create themselves in a better and better version of themselves. Because the people who really are becoming genuine, authentic, and growing in character and the way they live life, you see them immediately. You can pick them out of the crowd. And that's who you want to come to work. That's who you want to lead your organization. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's incredible. So what would you tell a new leader or an emerging leader about failure? Failure is such a role in life, but we don't always proactively talk about it. Like, you are going to fail. Like, I think about my kids. We pump them up, we prep them for all the things, we get them moving in the right direction. And I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know how often I've told them there's going to be moments where you fail, and this is what we do with that. There's things that emerge, but it's not something we talk about. What would you tell a new and emerging leader about failure?
Well, first of all, as you have articulated, failure is real. It happens to every single person. And I would tell you that sometimes failures are so great, you have a difficulty getting past them. Because what we haven't talked about in leadership is the word credibility. And a failure can zap your credibility, and it's really hard to rebuild credibility. And so you have to make some different maneuvers in life that you may not have wanted to make. All that to be said is failure is real. It can be really serious, or it can be kind of minor in its seriousness. But what you have to keep doing is you have to keep going. You have to keep moving forward, and you have to keep trying. And so you have all these stories that are written in books have been written about how many times a certain person failed before they got this giant success. That's all true. But what I just think failure is a part of life, and I think you have to keep going. I will tell you this. If I were a new leader starting over again, I wouldn't take just any job. I would try to tie myself to leaders in jobs that I knew would help me through failure. Because what you need when you fail is encouragement. And I make it no secret that I've used the Bible as one of my key resources for leadership training. And most of what I teach today, but though I may teach it in a different genre, I may teach it in a different way, actually came from there. I don't know of anyone greater in leadership in the Old Testament, at least, than the guy named David. I don't know of anyone who made giant mistakes and failures more than David. And I see David over and over again in great discouragement because of his failures. But he was around people who would pick him up and help him over and over again. And so you got to find people in your life that you know will listen, who will encourage, that will not be harsh, that will not be judgmental, to walk you through those failures. I wish I could make every person understand. Find those people. Work for those people if at all possible. But if you can't work for them, find them and use them as mentors or use them as just sounding boards and just go to them and say, look, I got to talk to you. I've made a big mess out of things. And when people do that to me now, I say, well, tell me about the mess. Let's talk about it. And we usually, with what and how questions, work our way to a good spot almost every single time.
Yeah.
So long answer, but that's
no, that's great. That's great. That's great. I appreciate you being that person for me at times and for others. I know for the example you've been. It's about 2 years ago right now that I was on the phone with you, just saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing some things a little different professionally, and you helped coach me through that from a distance, and you knew where my heart was in terms of the opportunity to go do some of these things. And I think about some of the encouragement you and others provided in that season of I was trying to think and figure it out, not because I didn't have something. It was one of those things. It's like, is this an ending that needs to be exercised so the next great thing can happen? And you've been that phone call away for me and so many others for many years. And just thank you for that. Thank you for, yeah.
Okay, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
This whole concept of this definition of leadership that I work around and what you and I wrote about in a book is leaders work for their good and speak for their welfare. I'm telling you, you do that with everyone you intersect. So if someone calls and they got a failure problem going on or they got a career change going on, I'm telling you, invest yourself in other people and work for their good. Even when you don't feel like you have time, even though when you feel like, I don't want to talk about this again, keep doing it, because investing yourself in people remains to be a leader's best and most important work.
Work for the good of the people, show up with grace, and never flinch. All right?
That's right.
Never flinch. Never flinch.
That's good.
Dr. Jones, appreciate so much you sharing today, your vulnerability, the stories you shared, just for the consistent example of being a good listener, encourager, and connector. Thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for all the inspiration you provided me and so many others over the years to grow and to think as people who have the opportunity to lead. And just thank you for being a part of this. For those listening today, just please, if this episode resonated with you at all, please like, share, subscribe, download the Bad Days Leadership Podcast. We appreciate you. Remember, those bad days that you are having or will have, those do not define you. They can refine you towards the better version of yourself if we learn those lessons. So thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Bad Days Leadership Podcast.